WNC, America's Black News Channel. Watch 15 minutes. Share with everyone. Finally, news that speaks to us.
All right, joining me now to talk about Andrew Young's legacy, we have Ernie Suggs. He's a race and culture reporter for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Ernie, it's a pleasure. Thank you so much for taking the time out to join us this afternoon.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
It's our pleasure. So Andrew Young, I mean, he is a living gem, a national treasure. He's got more titles in a little bit. Former ambassador to the UN, former mayor of Atlanta, the Presidential Medal of Freedom honoree, also civil rights warrior. What is it about Andrew Young that just transcended right across racial and party lines?
I think what you're saying is what it is. He's so transcendent. He's so transparent in his actions and his words. Like you said, he's a civil rights leader. He's a former mayor of Atlanta. He's the first United States congressman from Georgia since Reconstruction. He's a former United States ambassador. He's a co-chair of the 1996 Olympics. So every aspect of his life can be a book unto itself. So he's a guy, I was with him this morning. I was with him yesterday. I'll be with him all weekend as we celebrate his 90th birthday. He is just a regular, I mean, one of the great things about him is that he comes off as such a regular guy, but he has so much to offer. He has so many layers on himself, and he's seen everybody. He's almost like an American zealot with all the lives that he's lived.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're talking Malcolm X, Harry Belafonte, the late Congressman John Lewis. One thing that I learned through my own research, and probably most people don't even know this, is that he actually met Malcolm X before he met Martin Luther King Jr. Can you tell us more about that?
Well, that's part of his legacy and part of who he is in terms of just being able to coexist with different groups. So yes, he met Malcolm X early on. He met, as a matter of fact, one of the more interesting parts of his life is that he met Martin Luther King in 1957 when they were both speaking at a college. They were both alphas and they were both there to speak at an alpha event. But he knew Coretta Scott King first because Coretta Scott King's Andrew Young's wife had gone to the same high school and grew up in the same county as Coretta Scott King.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of stuff that was going on with Andrew Young even before he joined the civil rights movement. As you can understand, and I think it's important to understand that he came to Atlanta in 1961. He came from New York City, and by way of Howard University, by way of New Orleans. So he wasn't one of these traditional Southern preachers like Abernathy or Shuttlesworth or Lowry, who came up through the Southern Church to work at the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. He came here from New York City, so he had a different attitude. He had a different perspective on life. And I think that that's what made him so valuable to the Southern Christian Leadership Conference and so valuable to Martin Luther King, because he offered a different kind of perspective.
Yeah, you mentioned his first wife, Jean Childs Young, who unfortunately died of cancer. Talk about how her nonviolent stance, right, actually motivated him to go in that direction.
Yeah, she was very instrumental in his life. There's a story, I have a book that's coming out on him that's coming out on March 29th. There's a story about how when he was a pastor, of course, everyone knows he was a pastor, which is another aspect of his life. And they had moved to Thomasville, Georgia.
Yeah.
And they were being threatened by the KKK. And he, at this point, said, get your gun. He told his wife to get your gun. I know you can shoot because we've been to Coney Island, again in New York. I know you can shoot. I can shoot. And if they come to our house, we're going to shoot them and kill them before they shoot and kill us. And she wouldn't do it. Yeah. She said, look, you are a man of God. I am a woman of God. And, we're not going to take the life of another person, even though they are coming here perhaps to harm us or to threaten our family. And they got into a big fight about that. But that showed him there that his wife, Jean Childs Young, at the time, was very nonviolent. She had grown up in the whole thing of nonviolence. And it was her in 1961 when the both of them were watching television in their New York City apartment. They were watching television about what was going on in the South. And he was happy and content with his job in New York City. And she said, we got to go and be a part of this. We got to go and help. So although he had met Martin Luther King Jr., he did not really know Martin Luther King Jr. And she just said, we got to go because our lives, what we're doing is not as important as what John Lewis and C.T. Vivian and Martin Luther King Jr. are doing in the South. And we have to go down there and help them. And it was her. It was Jean Charles Young who called Coretta Scott King and said, "Hey, we're moving to Atlanta. What can you do for us?" And Dr. King hired him, and the rest is history.
Yeah, let's talk about that. I mean, he followed King across the country for years. Very instrumental in helping to write the Civil Rights Act of 1965, the Voting Rights Act as well. Talk about, because I learned this through my own research, how instrumental Harry Belafonte was after King passed. Somebody needed to carry the torch. The next move was politics, but no one wanted to make that jump. Talk about that.
Well, first of all, Harry Belafonte, Sidney Poitier, Sammy Davis Jr., all those people, all those entertainers were very important to the civil rights movement, the actual civil rights movement, because they provided funds. They provided exposure, they provided bail money when people were in jail. So after Martin Luther King was killed, they were looking for ways to carry forth the civil rights message. Even before Dr. King was killed, even the days before he was killed, he was talking to Andy Young and other younger people, Jesse Jackson, about what do we do next? What's our next move? And the obvious next move was into politics. So after Dr. King died, Harry Belafonte was like, "Hey, we need to find someone who's going to run for office. We need to find some young leaders who are going to run for office and take civil rights into the White House, to the State House, to the Capitol, the United States Capitol. And we need people." And Andy Young was resistant to be that person, but they convinced him to be that person. He ran. He lost his first time, and he won in 1973 to become the first United States congressman of black origin, of black descent, to represent Georgia since the Reconstruction.
Yeah.
So Harry Belafonte and all those guys, they don't get their due as civil rights leaders because they're entertainers, but they were just as much a part of what those guys were doing than anyone else, than any of the preachers.
Yeah, and the former ambassador brought the Olympics, which the city of Atlanta still is feeling that economic boom. I mean, decades later. Ernie, thank you so much.
Yeah,
I wish we had more time.
No, wait.
I do. I wish we had more time because I can go on and on and on, and I'm sure you can too. Thank you, sir.